Hello, hello. Um, I want to talk a little bit about risk, and I want to start by asking the following question. If you were to increase your appetite, for risk for the next 10 years, do you think that in 10 years you would be happier or less happy? How many people here think that if you took more risk, you would be happier 10 years from now? I think you're right. And I think the question is, what's holding us back? I started thinking about this problem a few years ago when I met a friend for lunch in New York. We haven't met for a long time, and we caught up. And we talked and we talked and we talked. And then he told me that he was not so happy in his marriage. I've been married for a long time, and things were not going that well. They were not terrible, but they were not going well. And he asked me if I have a piece of advice. And I said, do you have enough good material about your wife? I will not repeat her name here. Do you have enough good material about her to write her a 3-page love letter in handwriting? Do you have enough material? And he said, yes. And I said, if you wrote that 3-page love letter, only positives, and you read it to her, or you gave it to her, do you think it would improve the quality of your relationship? He said, I'm almost positive it will. And then I said, and can you actually go ahead and do it? And he said, no. And I asked him, why not? And he said that there's a small chance that you will react negatively, maybe mock him, maybe be negative. And he said he just can't handle that. Now we went through the cons and the pros, we gave it probabilities. It was a really good decision to take that risk, but he couldn't take it. Now, let's think about his decision. This guy, my friend, could have kept on the traditional path of doing nothing new. And how much will that change his relationship? Nothing. It will just stay the same. Or he could take a risk. He could do something different. Now, the trick is that if he did something different, he has options. If he did something different, it could have an upside. It could go very well. And he gave it the estimate of 98% chance that it will go well. Or it could go badly. He gave it 2% chance it would go badly. Now, if we think about risk in general, upsides are the things that we want. Upsides are the ingredients for a better life. Downsides are the things that we don't want, but it's the entry ticket to get the positive side, right? If you just take no risk, you'll get whatever you have now. If you take risk, you hope for good, but you have to pay the price of maybe something bad will happen. And in the case of my friend, what was very clear was that the downside was dominating. That the downside, he was just paying so much attention to it, that he was not willing to take the upside because he was so focusing on the downside. And that's really going to be a topic for today. Why do we so much over-focus on the downside? So to start thinking about this, I want us to think about our mind as a decision-making apparatus. In my metaphor for the mind as a decision-making apparatus is that the mind is like a vintage Swiss Army knife. Vintage Swiss Army knife, 2 parts. Let's start with the Swiss Army knife. The Swiss Army knife is not good at anything. The Swiss Army knife is excellent by being kind of okay in lots of things, but not excellent in anything. I'm willing to bet that you never had a situation where you said, I want to solve X, where's my Swiss Army knife? No, it's never the best tool for the job. What is its greatness? It's kind of okay with lots of things, and we can carry it with us. Our mind is kind of like that too. Not excellent in anything, quite okay in lots of things, and we can carry it with us. But the metaphor is not just a Swiss Army knife, it's a vintage Swiss Army knife. What is the vintage part? The vintage part is the idea that our mind as a decision-making apparatus was forged at a very different period in life, in our history, evolutionary history. We were hunter-gatherers, and the tools we developed in that period were designed for very different tools. Living in small society, dealing with risk, dealing with food. Now, we still carry that vintage Swiss Army knife, only now we don't have relevant tools. And that's the situation we're in, right? We learned how to deal with fat and sugar a long time ago. Give us donuts, we don't react so well. And we did not have tools to deal with money, and so on and so forth. So the mind as a vintage Swiss Army knife means that we had tools that were designed more or less for that environment, but now it's not relevant anymore. Now, how does this translate into risk, into our hesitancy of taking risk? And it does so in three ways. It treats us as individuals, the way we work with our mind. It treats us as the way we think about our society and social issues, and about our environment. So let's think about each of those. Let's start with the part of the individual. Paul Samuelson, the famous economist, gave the following story. He came to one of his colleagues at the Department of Economics, and he says, I want to offer you a bet. I have a coin here. I'll give you different numbers than what Samuelson did, but he said, I have a coin here, I'll flip it. If it comes on head, I'll give you $1,100. And if it comes on tails, you will give me $1,000. Do you want to take the bet? Plus 1,100 minus 1,000. And his friend said, you know what? I don't. He said, I understand the expected value is positive, but if I'll win 1,100, I'll be only slightly happy. If I lose $1,000, I'll be really miserable for a really long time, so I don't want to do it. This is what is called loss aversion. We are much more against losing. We get much more negative about losing than we're happy about winning. Why is that, evolutionary speaking? Let's go back to our vintage Swiss Army knife. In our evolutionary history, if we went hunting and something worked out well, we hunted a rabbit. How good is that? It's kind of good. Maybe we live for another day or two. Let's say something didn't work out well, and let's say a tiger hunted us. How bad is that? Really bad. So in our evolutionary history, good was only slightly good, bad was really bad. So what did we learn in our vintage Swiss Army knife? We learned to be really afraid of the downside, because the downside used to be much bigger. Now we're not longer in a world like this, but we still pay attention to that. So Samuelson's friend said, I understand the expected value is positive, but I'm so against the negative that I'm not going to take that bet. So that's part number one. But then Samuelson continued, and he said, what if we played that game 1,000 times? And his friend said, of course I want to play that. And Samuelson said, here is what you're telling me. You're telling me that if I came to you every day, and every day I offered you this gamble, plus 1,100 minus 1,000, every day you would think about that gamble, every day you would think about the losses, that you don't want them, and every day you would say no. But if I offered you that for 1,000 days, let's say 3 years, at the end of the 3 years, you would say, I said no every time, but I really wish I took it. Think about what it means. It means that when we think about risk, we think about risk one at a time, and therefore we're afraid of taking risk, where in fact, if we thought about risk as a portfolio, we would take very different decisions. Okay, the next part I wanted to say is something about social. Think about gossip. Again, part of our vintage Swiss Army knife. Why do we have gossip? Why do we love gossip so much? Imagine I had an apple and you wanted my apple. You're bigger, you're stronger, you could take my apple. But what if I had gossip on my side? What if we were all one community and we lived together and we're going to live together for a long time, and you knew that I have gossip on my side and you know that everybody would listen to gossip? all of a sudden I have a superpower because you would not want me to tell that you took my apple, and everybody will mistreat you. So gossip used to be a tool for deterrence. It wasn't about tool for punishing bad behavior. It was a tool for deterrence. You would not even start with me because you would be afraid of gossip. Again, gossip used to be a good tool. These days, with social media, not so good tool anymore, but we still have it because of our evolutionary history. And finally, environmental. Lots of ways to think about how we structure our environment. And if you think about it, we structure our environment to a great degree to avoid risk. We create our environment to avoid mistakes, to avoid risk. The best example, of course, is bureaucracy. I really hate bureaucracy. I have a website called the Center for Advanced Bureaucracy where I complain about bureaucracy. I went to Reykjavik to visit the monument for the unknown bureaucrat. It's in Iceland, if you want to. But anyway, all of these components, our individual mind, the way we think socially, and the way we construct our environment to avoid downsides and mistakes, are all about creating this tremendous pressure of thinking about what could go wrong. And when we think about what could go wrong, we also give up on trying new things because of our, as we said, the vintage Swiss Army knife. And the argument is that because we pay so much attention to the downside, we don't take risks and we don't live the kind of life that we should be living. I started by asking you if you think that if you took more risk 10 years from now, you would thank yourself. I think your answer was mostly yes. It's because we pay so much attention to downsides, we don't take risk, we don't do things differently, and we end up not maximizing our lives. Here is a visual representation. Think about two mountains. One is a little hill, quite sure, and how you get there. One is a really high mountain, but the ups and downs. You have to take some risks to get there. Most of us, on a standard way, we just take the slow incline to a little hill. We give up on lots of things by not taking risks. Okay, so now the question is, how do we help ourselves take more risk? If we're designed with this vintage Swiss Army knife against taking risks by focusing too much on the downside, how do we help ourselves? How do we do better? So the first example I want to point out is what is called the portfolio approach. And this already comes from Samuelson. Samuelson said, don't look at each event at a time. Look at it as if it's a portfolio. So imagine you're in a situation. You can say, do I want to take risk now and over-focus on the downsides? Or you could say, is this how I want to behave forever? By the way, I've done lots of research on risk. In one of them, I asked people what area in their lives they take more risk and less risk. Do you know what is the area in which people take the least amount of risk? Romantic. It's kind of interesting. In that area, we're the most apprehensive about it. So imagine you're in a party and you think about going to somebody and say that you like them or ask them for a date, and you're worried about being mocked or being rejected. The Samuelson approach says, don't think about this one time being mocked. Ask yourself whether as a life strategy, you say, whenever I meet somebody that I like, I always want to not approach them. Right? It's a very different question, but when you think about it as a portfolio, we do much better. Another approach is to take what is called the outside perspective. When we think about ourselves, we think about the downside. When we think about other people, we're much more rational. So for example, we asked people in a study to think about the situation in which they were diagnosed by a physician for some illness. And we asked them whether they would tell to this physician, you know, thank you for the diagnosis, but can I have my medical case? I want to go for a second opinion. What did people say? I can't do that. And then we asked them, would you advise somebody else to get a second opinion? People say, of course. So the idea here is when we think about our own decisions, we're basically focusing a lot on the downside. how unpleasant will it be to tell a doctor I don't trust them so much and I want to get my record? The idea is to advise somebody else, be more objective about it, and then turn around and take our own advice. The next example I want to give comes from a category I call bypass our own system. And this particular example of rewarding failure came to me because I met a CEO of a big company quite a few years ago. And he sat next to me at the conference. And when there was a break, he told me that the people in his company are a little too comfortable. He said, nobody's taking risks, the company is doing well, things are as usual, nobody is taking risk. And he said, how can I get people to take more risk? And I said, you want a risky strategy for that? And he said, yes. So I say, start rewarding failure. I say, create a day in the company where you give a prize to the biggest failure of the year. And he did that. And he did it in a bigger way than I expected. They have a day now, it's been 13 years. They have a day in the company where people are presenting posters of their failures. And then he picks the biggest failure of the year and gives an award on the stage. And by the way, this approach has worked better than I expected. You know, what I expected was that you need to do some cultural change and you need to think about how you reward failure. What I didn't realize is how much people hide their failures, and in this way people start sharing them. And also, of course, over time, people became more and more courageous. Just to be clear, he doesn't give it to people who made a stupid mistake, right? That's not the point. The point is to give it to people who took real risk and tried something different and just didn't work out. There's another category, which is a category of things that get better over time. And I'll give you one example from this. It's about creating your own luck. Now, it might sound strange how you create your own luck. It turns out you can create your own luck. And here's the story. Think about two people playing basketball. One of them is really, really careful. They never want to take any risk, and they wait until they have 100% chance of success. And they tried 3 times in a game, and they succeeded 3 times in a game. The other person, much more relaxed, tries every time they have 50% chance. They try 40 times, and they're successful 20 of them. Who is a bigger contributor to the game? But life is not basketball. We'll come back to basketball later, but life is not basketball. And what I mean by that is that basketball is binary. You throw the ball, it's either in or out. Life is often not binary. Life is more like gardening. And let's think about the same example here with gardening. Imagine 2 gardeners. One gardener is waiting until they're 100% sure that the tree will grow, and they plant 3 trees a year and they grow 100% of the time. The second one waits until they have 50% chance. So they plant many more trees and many more grow, but this is not a binary event, which means that as the trees start growing, the second gardener can reallocate their time. They can see which trees are not growing so well and stop. They can see which trees are growing well and put more energy. So luck in that regard has trying more, like the basketball, but it also has seeing what works and put more effort in it, and very importantly, see what doesn't work and stop putting energy into that. And that's basically the recipe for luck. So are there lucky people or not? Yes, there are. And this is the recipe. Try more and change your investment of energy and change what you stop doing. So these are the 3 categories of solution. But I want to add one more thing to the picture. You know, up to now, we talked about risk as outcomes. We toss a coin, it's up or down. We get 1,100, we lose this. My friend is going to read a letter. His wife will either increase the romantic relationship or decrease. We talked about the outcomes. What about the process? Life is not just about the outcome. Life is also about the process. So imagine that you're in a new town. And there are two basketball games. One basketball game is between two teams you know nothing about. Everybody's an excellent player. If you're going to go to that game, it will be a huge performance of human achievement, athletic achievement. The second game, you know both teams very well. One team you really like, one team you really dislike. Which game are you going to go to? Now, the first one, you'll have neutral emotion. The second one will be ups and downs. You'll be really happy when your team wins. You'll be really miserable when your team is behind. Most people say, of course, I'll go to the one that is an emotional roller coaster. What if you were 95% sure that your team is going to lose? That game is most likely to end in a negative outcome. And not just that, the experience itself will have more negatives than positives. Still, most people say, that's what I want. Now think about what does it mean about what life do we want? You know, when we think about life, most people say, I want a comfortable life. I don't think most people want that. I don't think most people would want the boring basketball game. I think we actually want the ups and downs. We actually want to be deeply involved, not all the time. There's a limit, but to some degree, I think we want a life that is complex and fulfilling, what is called a rich life rather than a boring life. So risk is not just about the outcomes, it's also about the process, because taking risks gives us a much more varied life. And let me end with two homework assignments. One of the categories that people don't take risk in is buying gifts. You know, people go to somebody's house and they bring a bottle of wine or sometimes chocolate. Zero risk and zero value. Nobody ever says, oh my goodness, thank you so much for this bottle of wine. My life is going to be changed because of that. Now, I want to ask you to think about taking risk. When we studied gift giving, we found out that gift givers don't want to take risk. Gift receivers wish that the other person took some more risk. Now, in my case, for example, one of my friends gave me not too long ago an orange pillow. Doesn't fit my sofa. I would have never chosen that orange pillow, but it reminds me of my friend. And it's a great gift. I wish it was a different color, but but even in the current color, she took a risk, she imposed on my life, and now I get to think about her to a much higher degree, in a positive way. I think gifts for me is one of those areas that we just don't take enough risk. So, homework number one, please think about your next gift, take more risk, see how it is. But please remember, it's not just one time. If you fail, that's it, right? You have to do it for a long time. The second thing is romantic. As I told you, romantic life is one of those areas where people don't take enough risk. Think about how vulnerable it is to tell somebody how much you really love them. It's a very, very tough situation. But if you think about life in the long term, that vulnerability and that risk has long-term payoffs. So, to more risk, and then please do these two homework tasks. Thank you.